1971. That's according to Pew Research. The same research reveals a widening income gap in America, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. What will you do to strengthen middle class that is no longer the majority?
For decades, the professional political class of both parties has been talking about the middle class. For decades, Republicans in particular have been talking about reducing the size and scope of government, spending less money, reducing the complexity. And yet, for 40 years, the government has gotten bigger and more expensive. We now have a 75,000-plus page tax code, although politicians have run for office for decades promising reform. And all the while, middle-class incomes have stagnated. You see, when government gets bigger and bigger, more powerful, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the middle class gets squeezed. We need to understand who the job creators are in this country, because we need more jobs to grow the middle class and to grow the wages of the middle class. Who creates jobs? Small businesses, new businesses, family-owned businesses. They create two-thirds of the new jobs in this country, and they employ half the people. I started out typing for a 9-person real estate firm. My husband, Frank, started out driving a tow truck for a family-owned auto body shop, and we are crushing small businesses and destroying the middle class. So here's my blueprint to take back America. Let us first actually reform the tax code from 73,000 pages down to 3. There's a 20-year-old plan to do exactly that. And then let us begin piece by piece to focus on every single dollar the government spends so that we will spend less overall and still have enough for our priorities. And that requires the government to budget the way you do at home. Examine every dollar, cut any dollar, move any dollar. The fancy term for that is zero-based budgeting, but I call it common sense. Citizens, we got to take our country back.
Thank you, Ms. Fiorina.
Governor Huckabee, you know, it used to be you could graduate from high school and get a pretty good job at the local factory, enough to take care of your family and yourself. Those days seem to be gone. It's pretty hard to do that nowadays. Businesses are increasingly turning to automation to increase their productivity levels. It's happening right here, in fact, at the Boeing factory in North Charleston. The president says automation threatens workers' ability to get higher wages. Do you agree with that? And if so, do you have a solution?
Let me go back to the reason so many people are having a hard time getting ahead. The tax system punishes them. Think about this. If you work really hard and you start moving up the economic ladder, you get bumped into a different tax bracket, so the government thinks it deserves more of your hard work than you do. And it's one of the reasons that no matter how many different reforms you have to a tax on people's productivity, you're still taxing their work, their savings, you're taxing their capital gains, inheritance, dividends, you're taxing everything that produces something. And it's why I really believe it's time to do something bold, not something minute. This is no time for a tap of the hammer, a twist of the screwdriver. It's time for something big. That's why the fair tax transforms our economy. And we don't punish workers. It's the only way we're going to get middle-class people moving ahead again, because the harder they work, the more they keep. No payroll tax deducted from their checks. They get their entire paycheck. And one of the most important parts, it's built on the common sense with which we raised our kids and trained dogs. You reward behavior you want more of, and you punish behavior you want less of. That's how I raise kids. It's how I trained our dogs. And folks, it's not that difficult. We now punish the behavior that we say we want more of by taxing it, and we reward the behavior that we say we want less of. So if you make a good investment, we punish you with a tax. If you make a bad investment, you can write that off, and the rest of the taxpayers will help subsidize you and bail you out.
Thank you very much, Governor Huckabee. Senator Santorum, 40% of babies born today are born to single moms. That's twice as high as reported back in 1980, and it's 11 times as high as in 1940. Studies show that children are always better off economically, most often, and emotionally, with two parents in a household. From a policy perspective, should the government be doing anything to encourage family formation?
You know, we've had this debate about the economy. We haven't talked the one issue that now increasingly even the right and the left are coming to agreement with. I've run around doing 300 town hall meetings talking about a book written by a liberal Harvard sociologist. Not a normal thing for me to be talking about, but named Robert Putnam, who wrote a book called Our Kids. And he wrote this book, I think, ostensibly to support the Democratic argument that the middle of America is hollowing out and the income gap is widening and the rich are getting richer. When he studied all the information as to what was going on, he realized that the biggest reason that we're seeing the hollowing out of the middle of America is the breakdown of the American family. The reality is that if you're a single parent, a child of a single parent, and you grew up in a single parent family neighborhood, and you went to that single parent family school, the chance of you ever reaching the top 20% of income earners is 3% in America. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but that's not good enough. And we have been too politically correct in this country because we don't want to offend anybody, to fight for the lives of our children. You want to be shocked? You read the first few chapters of Dr. Putnam's book. He talks about Port Clinton, Ohio, and growing up there in the 50s and how poor kids actually survived and did well, even though they were poor and disadvantaged. But then he goes to the towns today, and these kids are failing and failing miserably. They don't have a shot. And we won't even have the courage to have leadership at the federal level, not with legislation, but the most powerful tool the president has, the bully pulpit, to encourage each and every one of you, churches and businesses and educators and community leaders, to let's have a national campaign to rebuild the American family and give every child its birthright, which is a mom and a dad who loves them. That will change this economy.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, candidates. We're not finished yet. More from the Republican presidential debate in